The milkman, the paper boy, evening TV. Did I get delivered here? Somebody tell me, please. This whole world's confusing me. Clouds as mean as you've ever seen. Ain't a bird who knows your dream. Then a little voice inside you whisper, don't sell your dreams so soon. Everywhere you look, everywhere there's a heart, there's a heart. I hear the horn.
Hello and welcome to The Grove. Today we have a very large experiment. We're going to be building layers and testing density. And while you see all these ingredients out in front of you, we're first going to show you a simplified version, and then we will introduce all of these objects and ingredients for the more advanced version. So for our first part of the experiment that everybody can do, we're going to be testing oil and water. And we're gonna see how these two ingredients separate and create these layers, and then we will drop some objects in them to see what sinks and what floats.
Alright guys, so this is our first part of the experiment, and like we said earlier, this is the simplest part and this is very easy for everyone to do. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna test out a couple of things, what does and doesn't float. And we have a couple of beads right here. And we're gonna see if they float in the water. So just right away, even right here, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna try it in our big cup of water. And we see that they float. That's really, really cool. So now, luckily this is our own bottle, so we can just go ahead and throw stuff in there. We throw our bead in there and we see that it doesn't float. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna show exactly how the density affects everything. So first off, we are going to pour half of our jar. We're gonna fill up half of our jar with water. And I put red food color in there just so you guys can see it a lot clearer. Now I'm gonna fill up the other half with oil. And we can be a little bit aggressive with this because the oil and the water will just separate on their own right away. So if you zoom in, and you look at it, we see that we have two layers. There's a layer of red and a layer of oil. The oil is a little bit yellowish. And like we said earlier, if we drop in a bead, it sinks in the oil, but it floats on top of the water. Now just to show you guys that we're not trying to trick you, I'm gonna go ahead and throw something a little bit heavier, and this should actually sink all the way to the bottom.
Oh, I think it needs just a little bit of help.
And it drops. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this up a level, and here we have two layers, and we only have two different types of objects in there. Now let's take it up a notch.
Alright, so now that Rios has shown us the different layering between our oil and water, we are going to take it up a notch like he said. So we clearly have a lot of ingredients out in front of us, so we're going to explain them to you. So for our first layer in our cylinder right here, we're going to pick something with a really high density level, which is honey, and then we're going to pick a heavy object that could pass through all of them, which is marbles. Next up, we have Karo syrup or corn syrup, and we're going to use these larger letter beads. Next, we're going to have milk, and we're going to take our pipettes. We're going to suck some up into here and then use that. That's just a regular layer. And then for after milk, we're going to go with some dish soap. So we have that prepped, and for our object, we're using this little coin that we kind of modified. So when we drop it, it'll sit flat in between the layers. And then, Mr. Rios.
All right, so as you guys have seen so far, we have a bunch of colorful stuff. And just to kind of make it easier for you guys to see, we have water right here, and we put red food coloring. So that's what that is, it's just red water. We have the vegetable oil. I believe in the water, what we're gonna throw is some of the beads. You guys already saw some of that in the earlier part. For the oil, we're gonna use the tiny alphabet dice, and we'll see just how far down that goes. And once again, we have alcohol that we use blue food dye. So that just makes it a lot easier for you guys to see all the layers. So with all these colors and all these different liquids, you're gonna be able to see very clearly how much it separates. And we're gonna try our hardest to make sure that all the layers are the same height, just to make it that much easier for you guys to see.
So we have our cylinder here, and we're gonna add our first layer, which is honey. We're gonna try and be precise as we can. If you guys are doing this and you make mistakes, it's okay, it happens. Rios and I definitely did this experiment before filming it for you guys, and we definitely ran through our trial and errors. So we're going to use pipettes for a lot of the objects to try and not get any of the liquids on the sides of the cylinder. If it happens to you guys, your layers might mix, so just keep that in mind.
One thing you can do, we don't have access to it right now, but we were looking forward to it,
Yeah.
is if you have like a long enough rod, like a stir rod or anything, you can put it all the way to the bottom. It touches the bottom, and you can use that to pour it in there, and it travels along it, and just makes it so it doesn't touch the walls. And we'll show you that later on.
Alright, so here we go with our honey layer. And also, before we even start pouring, this is a 2-person project. If you're going to use a lot of these liquids or different liquids that you find with varying thicknesses, you definitely need 2 people, because it's not easy trying to be really precise and keep these layers as even as possible.
Yeah, some of us are a little more shaky than others, and some of us bump tables.
I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, I'm not gonna lie to you. So we have numbers on the sides of the cylinder. I'm gonna try my best.
I'll help her. So once again, this is a teamwork effort. So we got to 13. That's close enough for us. Now, one thing we gotta do is put our marble in there, right, Miss Danny?
Right. So, we're gonna pick a marble. Alright, so now our milk is just a regular layer, so we're just gonna go to our next liquid, which is dish soap. We have that ready and prepared for the next layer.
Sorry to interrupt.
You're fine.
And I only interrupt because I remember this really last minute. Make sure you use the thick kind of dish soap, because we had some watery dish soap that we tried this experiment with the other day, and it actually started to blend with like some of the other liquids.
Yeah.
So it was not dense enough to separate layers. So what we have is our Dawn, and this is actually pretty thick dish soap.
Alright, so we're doing the same thing where we're trying not to touch our walls, right, Mr. Rios?
Yeah, we're gonna get as close as we can to the liquid, and if we do touch the wall, then let's make sure if we do touch the wall, let's make sure we kind of continue to touch that same spot. That way we don't get any other spots and we don't contaminate any of the liquids. All right, we have our Dawn soap in there, and do we have an item that goes in there for this one?
Yes,
It's our plastic coin.
It's our little modified coin. So we took a piece of coin and we kind of chopped it up. This is obviously for our testing purposes. We didn't have very many objects that would be light enough yet heavy enough to sit in the layer, so we had to kind of create our own. But definitely look around your house or wherever you are conducting this experiment and try to find something. If you need to modify something, obviously ask your parent or whoever is your adult around. But that being said, we're dropping down.
Cool. And what's our next layer?
Our next layer is going to be just our regular water.
Cool. All right, so next we have our red colored water, and as Miss Danny has been doing for the whole experiment, I'm going to try and get it as close to the liquid without letting the liquid touch the wall. If the pipette touches, it's okay, but we're gonna try and start making a nice layer. So now that we have a layer started, we can kind of be a little bit more aggressive with it. And if we see, we have a layer of green and a layer of red.
All right, and just like we did with before, what's our object that we're gonna put in our water?
So in our water, we're gonna use our small beads. These should sink in the water, but float on top of
The dish soap.
the dish soap.
Yeah.
I gotta be a little careful.
Ooh.
So we actually see that they go past the dish soap, but they float on top of the milk. All right, guys, we have 2 more layers to go, and we are gonna go ahead and set up our oil. And like I said earlier in the first part of the experiment, we can kind of be a little bit more aggressive with the oil and water because right away the oil just will not mix. And even if it goes all the way down, it'll just jump all the way to the top.
All right, so now we have a defined oil layer, and we're gonna drop our next object in, which is the
There you go.
smaller letter bead. So just for comparison really quick, this was the large bead, and this is the small bead. So let's see what happens. Oh my goodness! Well,
So we
you
are
guys-
learning a lot today.
Exactly. What's funny is that when Mr. Rios and I tested these objects the other day, they definitely sat in the layers definitively.
Can you
But
zoom in?
yeah,
Okay, we're gonna try that again later. Remind me to try that one more time, and I want to show you guys what happened. Oh, there it is. There's a bubble going up, and that is a bubble of oil. So that bead caught oil, and because the oil is less dense than everything else, it goes back up to the top. That's really cool. All right, next layer. We have our blue colored alcohol, and because it's at the very top, we don't really need to worry about the pipette, and I can run it down the side of the wall because we don't have to worry about contaminating any of the other liquids. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it right here on the lip, and I'm actually gonna use that and see if it guides it.
Oh, I'm a little too crazy, sorry.
It's so maybe the pipette would have been smarter, but the cool thing is we'll explain what I did wrong and what can how you can fix some of your errors.
so with our final layer before our last bit of explanation, we're gonna put our last object. Hopefully it floats. We don't know. This experiment has kind of gone off the rails. So I'm gonna drop it, but hopefully it floats. Yay! All right, Mr. Rios, some explanation as to what happened with our final layers here.
Okay, so it's very easy to see all the layers are separated. We have our honey, corn syrup, milk, dish soap, and then we have water. It is red and blue water, as you can kind of tell, and then we have our oil and our blue alcohol. Now, the food coloring is actually water-based, so when I poured in the alcohol, if it would have stayed all the way up here and none of it went down, then we would have had a solid blue layer and it would have separated very easy. Right now, if you could tell, it's kind of blue, but it's light blue right here because it actually lost some of the food coloring. When it dropped all the way down, that food coloring mixed in with the water over here, and the alcohol separated from the food coloring and went back up. So that's why we have a clear layer of alcohol right here and then dark blue alcohol, because it lost some of its food coloring to the water down here.
Also, another thing for your final layer, if you're going to pick rubbing alcohol for your layers, the highest percentage is going to be best. So we use 70%. So if you tried it with a lower percentage, it wouldn't separate. You need a higher percentage if you're going to use alcohol, so you can try and get that clear mark of one layer from another. We hope you guys try this experiment. It is a bit involved and it takes a little bit of patience and some critical thinking about how heavy objects are that you're gonna float or sink. So if you guys do end up doing this experiment, please upload it to your class soda so we can check them out, see what you guys test out, whether that's liquid wise or object wise. And other than that, thanks for joining us on The
The Growth.
Growth.